it. The motion is withdrawn. Report of committee.
The committees of conference on the disagreeing votes of the two branches with reference to the Senate amendments of the House bill modernizing firearm laws, House number 4139, which had been amended by the Senate by striking out all after the enacting clause and inserting in place all the text contained in Senate document number 2584, and by striking out the title and inserting in place of a new title, an act to sensibly address firearm violence through effective reform. Reports recommending the passage of the accompanying bill, an act modernizing firearm laws, House number 4885. Committee on Steering, Policy, and Scheduling reports recommend the matter be scheduled for consideration by the House. The Committee of Conference report has been signed by 4 of the conferees. On the part of the House, Michael S. Day, Carlos Gonzalez, and on the part of the Senate, Cynthia Stone Cream and Joan B. Lovely.
If the Mr. Day of Stoneham moves suspension of Rule 7A. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Rule 7A is suspended. Question comes on acceptance of the conference committee report. The chair recognizes Mr. Day of Stoneham. As the gentleman approaches the microphone, the chair asks that members take their seats and refrain from conversation. Court officers will clear the aisles. Mr. Day of Stoneham.
Madam Speaker, thank you, and through you to the members. Madam Speaker, I rise to introduce and ask for support of the Conference Committee report on H. 4885, an act modernizing firearm laws. And as I do, I ask that when a vote be taken, it's taken by a call of the yeas and nays.
Mr. Day moves when a vote be taken by a call of the yeas and nays. Those joining with them will rise. Division 1. 38, sufficient number having risen when a vote be taken by a call of the yeas and nays. Mr. Day of Stoneham.
Thank you again, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'm proud to introduce this Conference Committee report, which is reflective of years of deliberative discussions and compromise. The end product of these discussions is a bill that's designed to make us all safer, to make the residents of Massachusetts safer, our students safer, gun owners safer, our law enforcement professionals safer. Madam Speaker, gun violence is anathema to a civil society, but it continues to uniquely plague us here in America. I've heard some critics of this legislation say that it's unnecessary, that it's a solution in search of a problem. Well, here is a problem. Since June 1 alone, June 1, here in Massachusetts, there have been 14 deaths from gun violence. Parashashir Yashub, 27, from Taunton, shot and killed. David Rivera, 31, from Springfield, killed in a double shooting that resulted from the escalation of a fist fight. Mark Cavallaro, Thelma Tatton, both 56, from Bedford, shot and killed by their daughter, who had been seeking mental health treatment. Ryan Babcock, 38 years old, found shot to death in his car in Pittsfield at 4 p.m. in the afternoon. A 17-year-old shot multiple times and killed in Lynn. Aliana Dickey, a 15-year-old who had just graduated from middle school in Lynn, gunned down in her home. Her father not allowed to enter the crime scene when he arrived to hear the news. Christian Cousins, 17, from Stoughton, who would have been entering his senior year at Stoughton High School in September. Warren Julian, 40, from Jamaica Plain, one of 4 shootings that occurred on the 4th of July in Boston alone. Shane Goodson, 18 years old, from Springfield. Dexter Ortiz, 38 years old, from Holyoke. Albert Valentin Arias Moscat, 17 years old, from Lawrence. Henry Marte, 27 years old, also from Lawrence, shot in the head and killed. Andy Baez, 35 years old, from Boston, gunned down on the Arbor Way on Sunday night. And DeMonte William, 19 years old, just 3 days ago, killed in Springfield by a gun. That's just in Massachusetts. Since June 1, there have been 107 mass shootings, injuring 576 people and killing 103 people in the United States. June 1 to today. So there's your problem that we need to solve. We don't have to live this way. And we as representatives, having sworn to protect the Commonwealth, the common health, the common good of our residents, are obliged to do what we can to stop the scourge of gun violence. Madam Speaker, 2 years ago this past June, a rogue Supreme Court issued a decision upending decades of jurisprudence by cherry-picking through centuries of history in an attempt to limit the ability of states to pass basic firearm safety measures. The Bruin decision, as it's known, plunged courts across the country into deep confusion as they tried to muddle their way through its tortured originalism and to apply it to real-life and often tragic cases brought before them. Judges in different jurisdictions now cite to the same passages of history in rendering completely opposite decisions. While the severity of the Bruin decision may have been shocking, we in this House were prepared, engrossing legislation within days that aligned our law with what was proscribed by the court, while simultaneously preserving the safety of our neighborhoods and the rights of our people. Our speed in responding to that decision was yet another sign of how fiercely this House has guarded our firearm safety structure as we have led our state and our nation in enacting laws that keep our residents safe. As I said when we debated and passed an earlier version of this legislation, modernizing our firearm laws here in Massachusetts is an exercise in which we, and particularly we in this House, engage in regularly. We embrace that well-established practice again here today. Mr. Speaker, at the end of the last legislative term, the Speaker made a commitment to us as representatives and to the Commonwealth at large to engage in a full review of our firearm laws and to make them better for all. Today, Mr. Speaker, you deliver on that commitment. You and your staff's dedication and resolve have been the steel backbone of the efforts that bring us here today. For that, I say thank you. I also thank each and every member of the House for your engagement, your conversations, your concerns, and your criticisms. We began our review of firearm laws by getting out of the State House and traveling the Commonwealth, directly hearing from all of you in your districts, listening to your constituents, accepting input and thoughts from advocates at each stop on the tour. It was bipartisan and it was bicameral, and I thank you all for your engagement. We started on Cape Cod in February 2023. I thank the gentleman from Barnstable, the gentleman from Falmouth, the gentleman from Dennis, the gentlelady from Kingston, the gentleman from Plymouth, the gentlelady from Provincetown, the gentleman from Barnstable, the gentleman from Falmouth, who all joined community leaders in a discussion about the challenges we face at the intersection between firearms, mental health, and suicide. From that listening session came important parts of today's bill before us, allowing the Department of Mental Health and the Department of Public Health to share information with the Department of Criminal Justice Information Services so that our local licensing authorities will know about the mental health challenges applicants may be facing. We further empowered those local licensing authorities to have access to histories of the involuntary commitments of applicants. We also improve our extreme risk protective order law, our red flag law, by allowing our medical professionals, those who actually treat and observe individuals who are in distress and who acutely pose a substantial risk of harm to themselves or others to petition a court to remove firearms temporarily from those individuals while they're in crisis. We will also now allow law enforcement officers who have interacted with an individual in the past 30 days to raise that flag of concern to avoid a potential tragedy like we saw up in Lewiston, Maine. In March 2023, we traveled to Worcester. I thank the gentleman from West Boylston, the three gentlemen from Worcester, the gentlelady from Leominster, the gentleman from Fitchburg, the gentleman from Attleboro, and the senator from the 1st Worcester for joining us there as we discussed the concerns about firearms and domestic violence. From that listening session came provisions in this bill that update our harassment prevention order laws under Chapter 258E to be consistent with other abuse prevention orders by allowing courts to order the suspension and dispossession of firearm licenses, permits, and firearms themselves contemporaneously with the issuance of the HPO. We also now empower our law enforcement professionals to collect a respondent's firearm within 24 hours if that respondent does not surrender that firearm pursuant to a court order. Later in May, we traveled to Greenfield, where we were joined from the gentlelady from Deerfield, the gentlelady from Athol, the gentleman from East Hampton, the gentleman from Belchertown, and the gentlelady from Amherst, where we listened to concerns from hunters and recreational firearm owners about the existing laws. From that listening session came sections in this bill that will now consolidate and reorganize our firearms licensing sections into a single unified process with consistent and transparent standards and procedures for all applicants. And we correct the loophole in our laws to now allow individuals to safely transport their firearms on ATVs. We moved on to Brockton. I thank the gentleman from Brockton, the chair of the Veterans and Federal Affairs Committee, for hosting us, and the two gentleladies from Brockton, the gentleman from Sharon, the gentlelady from Abington, the gentleman from Quincy, for joining us as we heard about the impact of gun violence on that region of Massachusetts. From this discussion emerged the need for us to address concerns about funding our violence prevention programs that work. And this bill meets that moment by standing up a task force that will review the availability of federal funding and make recommendations on how best to support community violence prevention programs. This, to quote the Speaker, will be a game changer in our effort to support groups that are doing the work necessary to prevent gun violence from erupting on our streets. We moved on to Lowell. I thank the gentleman from Lowell, the gentlelady from Lowell, the gentlelady from Melrose, the gentleman from Beverly, and the gentlelady from Pepperell for their hospitality and engagement as we spoke and heard about the challenges presented by ghost guns and modifications to otherwise legal firearms. With this bill, Massachusetts will now lead the nation once again in our approach to addressing ghost guns, those homemade, untraceable firearms that continuously find their ways into the hands of gangs and violent individuals who want to make our neighborhood streets modern hellscapes. We will now define a frame and a receiver as a firearm and require them to be serialized through a clear process with the state and to be registered just like all other firearms. If you want to create a firearm on your own, you're no longer going to be allowed to pump these weapons onto our streets with impunity. And if you try to continue that practice, you're going to face significant criminal penalties. The illegal industry of making and selling ghost guns without any record of what is transpiring is going to end in Massachusetts. The gentleman from Roxbury, the gentleman from Hyde Park, and the gentleperson from Jamaica Plain, as we listen to the work being done by anti-violence organizations and individuals working to end street violence. We heard about the urgent need to re-examine our current programming and practices, and we responded to that call in this bill by establishing a special legislative commission that will involve key stakeholders in this area, who are charged with examining the existing government funding structure for violence prevention services and considering what communities are currently served and what communities are currently underserved by our funding programs, then making recommendations to us about how to best improve this area to provide our communities with the programming that they truly need. Our next step brought us to a packed house in Framingham, where concerns from school students and the challenges facing our youth. I thank the gentlelady from Marlborough, the gentleman from Framingham, the gentleman from Holliston, the gentlelady from Westboro, the gentleman from Natick, the gentleman from Milford, the gentleman from Watertown, the gentleman from Franklin, and the gentlelady from Newton for their contributions at this stop. As a result of that incredibly impactful listening session, we now authorize our school administrators, those who see our students on a daily basis, to petition a court for an extreme risk protective order if needed. And we clarify that nobody may bring a firearm onto the grounds of a school or onto a school bus that is serving students. We also say that nobody may bring a firearm into a polling place. There will be no intimidation through firearm while our citizens are following their rights to vote. We heard in Framingham from a young woman who described the hurdles she faced in seeking authorization to own self-defense spray for her own protection as she walks to and from school. And so in this bill, we now allow 12 to 15-year-olds to apply for a self-defense permit with parental permission, and 15 to 18-year-olds to independently apply for a self-defense spray permit. That this would encourage thugs to prey on unsuspecting passersby walking in isolated areas at night by macing them and attempting to mug them. To them, I say that the changes we make in this area of the law do not disturb the status quo for adults and simply extend protections that some parents want for their children. We then moved on to New Bedford, the Fall River area. We're hosted by the gentleman from New Bedford, who contributed so much to this bill, and the gentlelady from Fall River, to hear more concerns from communities directly impacted by gun violence. The concerns we heard there were consistent with the other voices we heard. So we now establish a Violence Prevention Federal Reinvestment Trust Fund to collect federal funds that match a percentage of the funding we are already spending on our SSYI programming. As we collect those funds from the federal government and fill that trust fund, we will be able to appropriate more funding to new and to proven violence prevention programs. We closed May by heading up to Lawrence. We were joined by the gentleman and the leader from Lawrence, the gentlelady from Lawrence, the two gentlemen from Methuen, the gentlelady from South Hamilton, the gentlelady from Andover, the gentlelady from Newburyport, the gentleman from Haverhill, and the senator from the 1st Essex, in a conversation about training and the safe handling of firearms. We agreed with what we heard from representatives of the Gun Owners Action League, that live firearm training is the best practice for gun owners and for overall safety. We heard Goal and the NRA when they said that they strongly encouraged live firearm training, but they did not believe the government could or should require it. While we heard them, we disagree that we cannot take steps here in Massachusetts to ensure that everyone can be made safer around firearms. So we now revamp our training requirements for those applying for a license to carry. In the future, the state police will create a uniform training curriculum and standardized tests for all new applicants. That will include live firearm training and disengagement training. Dealer applicants will also complete an online training program covering their responsibilities. We will also clarify the law to ensure that our local licensing authorities, our law enforcement professionals, receive the training they need to fully understand their licensing, dealer inspection, and reporting responsibilities. We keep the inspection of dealers with our local licensing authorities who know them best. However, if a local licensing authority does not want to continue that practice or is stretched too thin to perform this responsibility, we will now allow them to turn that duty over to our state police. And a year ago in June, Madam Speaker, we concluded our tour with 2 more stops. First, we joined the gentleman from Springfield, my fellow conference committee member, along with the other 3 gentlemen from Springfield, the gentleman from Longmeadow, the gentlelady from Holyoke, and the gentlelady from Northampton, to hear about gun violence plaguing the greater Springfield area. In addition to reinforcing the need to examine and revamp what we are doing in violence prevention, programming, and funding, Springfield also brought home to us the need to modernize our approach to assault-style firearms, which have been regulated in Massachusetts since our inception and have been affirmatively prohibited in Massachusetts for decades. We do this by updating the definition of assault-style firearm to include modern firearms and characteristics not contemplated by the existing ban, to codify the Attorney General's 2016 opinion on lookalikes and duplicates, and to require EOPS, with the advice of the Firearm Control Advisory Board, to periodically and regularly update and publish a complete roster of banned assault-style firearms. We protect the ownership, possession, transfer, and sale of assault-style firearms currently legally owned and registered in the Commonwealth with a legacy clause. So to put it simply, if you legally own a properly serialized and registered firearm in Massachusetts as of the effective date of this act, you can continue to own it, sell it, transfer it, do whatever you wish with it. Finally, on June 6th, we visited Lenox Town Hall to again hear from hunters and recreational firearm owners. I thank the gentleman from Lenox, the gentlelady from Pittsfield, and the gentleman from North Adams for their active participation. In addition to reaffirming the concerns we heard in Greenfield, what emerged from this meeting was the need to provide a clear standard for hunting and carrying a firearm while under the influence that is consistent with the standard for operating a motor vehicle under the influence, and to align those penalties as well. We do that in this bill. We will now also require notice to license and permit holders, alerting them 90 days ahead of time that their license or permit is due to expire and that they should renew. We also met with state, local, and federal law enforcement professionals who are focused almost exclusively on investigating and stopping the trafficking of illegal firearms. Thank you to the gentlelady from Dorchester and the gentlelady from Somerville, the vice chair of the Judiciary Committee, for their participation at the Fusion Center, where we discussed what law enforcement professionals need to continue to combat the flood of illegal firearms proliferating on our streets from out-of-state sources and from basement-dwelling merchants of death. As a result of that meeting, we will now update our existing firearm reporting system into one state database for firearm registration, reporting, and tracing. We require the registration of firearms not currently appearing on the existing registration transfer portal. We require law enforcement to immediately report crime gun data to the state database, which will automatically populate the federal ATF system for interstate tracing purposes. And we will expand the state's data compilation and reporting requirements with the creation of a publicly accessible online dashboard of anonymized aggregate firearm data to further firearm research and transparency. Madam Speaker, the effort undertaken to bring this bill to the floor today was one that required and involved every member of this chamber, with multiple meetings and sit-downs. Members of the public and myriad advocacy groups from all parts of the political spectrum. I recognize and thank my fellow conferees, specifically my friend and colleague and fellow lead conferee, the senator from Newton, for her unmatched passion in working to make Massachusetts the safest state in the country. Because of her work, we have a better bill here today. I also thank my fellow House conferees, the gentleman from Springfield, without whom we would not have arrived at consensus, and without whom we would not have ensured that all voices were heard in the final product. Sincere thanks also to the gentleman from Webster, who did not support the underlying bill as we headed into conference. He could have sat on that vote and refused to participate, take his ball and bat and go home, as did so many other groups during this process. Instead, he was engaged in conference and offered constructive thoughts and recommendations on how to improve this bill, and his participation did, in fact, improve this bill. Finally, having been tasked with conducting a study of our firearm code, the implications of the courts, and the challenges our communities face, I turned to my staff, who answered this challenge with unparalleled dedication. Thank you to Diana Williams and Michael Musto, who did the indispensable work of keeping the Judiciary Committee running, while other staff undertook the detailed work needed on this legislation. I offer my sincere thanks to Talia Quinn, who coordinated the listening tour and served as the point person for public feedback, good, bad, and ugly, and did so with unmatched patience and civility. Thank you also to Attorney Alex O'Connell, who now knows more about our firearm laws than anyone else in the Commonwealth, and who exhibited a mastery of this subject and helped us navigate countless challenges and questions from me, my colleagues, and the public. Finally, to Patrick Prendergast, the staff director who steered this ship with an extraordinarily able hand, Thank you for bringing this ship to shore and ensuring that this legislation gets over the finish line while somehow keeping the other 700+ bills at the top of our minds as well. Mr. Speaker, thank you again for your decades of leadership in making Massachusetts safer for all residents. I urge my colleagues to accept this report and vote in favor of this legislation. Thank you.
Mr. Sutton, Mr. McKenna of Sutton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and through you to the members. I rise in opposition to this conference report before us. But first, I do want to start by expressing some appreciation. Throughout this process, the gentleman from Stoneham and the gentleman from Springfield and our Senate conferees as well did have genuine and thoughtful inclusion of myself and the minority leader of the Senate. Though perhaps not always adopting our thoughts and our suggestions, I did feel that they were heard, that we were listened to, and that we were included, and I have appreciation for that. While perhaps I would have liked a little more time with the final editing pen, I think we all know how that would have turned out. I will also say that there are certainly pieces of this bill that are not objectionable to anyone, pieces that would be worthy of support if carved out and singled. Things such as intoxicated firearm carry, reckless discharge that strikes a dwelling, and the collection of data related to violent crime perpetrated with a gun. However, though the intention of the chairs in crafting this bill are certainly good, as the gentleman from Stoneham pointed out, I do think that this is a solution in search of a problem. The reality is that the Commonwealth already has some of the strictest gun laws in the nation. As a result, those who do choose to exercise their Second Amendment constitutional right have had to jump through hoops for decades to remain law-abiding citizens. Meanwhile, those intent on committing violence and doing so with a firearm will continue to have no regard for these proposed laws or for those already on the books. The gentleman read an impactful list of victims lost to gun violence. I certainly express remorse and sadness for those lives lost. But I must ask the gentleman, which section of this bill before us would have saved those lives? Will the perpetrators of those crimes face mandatory minimums that are enforced? Did the perpetrators of those crimes have those firearms lawfully? Were they licensed? Did they go through training? Did they achieve the LTC that lawful gun owners have done? I don't believe it's reasonable to assume that further regulations, requirements, and restrictions on those who do obey the law and who do not commit violent crimes will have a meaningful impact on reducing what is already the second lowest level of gun violence in the nation. The bill before us, filed with the perspective of a national narrative, not of a Massachusetts focus, is a signal to those law-abiding gun owners that their rights are at risk. While I appreciate that the chairs of the conference committee did choose a more restrained approach than either the House or the Senate version of the bill, at the end of the day, I cannot support this bill. It will impose more burdens on those exercising their rights. It will create a tremendous burden of work on state and local law enforcement, as well as regulatory authorities with no funding to support them. And regrettably, I fear it will do little to curb violent crime. To be sure, I do feel that we all share the same fundamental goal, to ensure the safety and well-being of our families, our neighbors, our communities. However, it's critical that we approach it with a balance, one that respects the constitutional rights while striving for effective solutions to address violent crime. This legislation we are discussing today, while certainly well-intentioned, I fear does not achieve that goal. Thank you.
Mr. Gonzalez of Springfield.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and through you to all the members. I stand in support of this landmark legislation. I am grateful for the leadership of the Speaker, who provided unwavering guidance, and clear direction. And to my colleague, distinguished colleague, Chairman Michael Day, who skillfully crafted this legislation. And for the leadership to allow me to echo the countless victims, parents, and residents, their voices, not only here at the Massachusetts State House, but across this state. The voices of mothers who have lost their children. Juanita Batchelor in the city of Springfield. And so many others in your communities, cities, and towns, including our rural areas. Or the 7-year-old child that was murdered in Lowell. The 15-year-old not too long ago in Brockton. Innocent lives taken by those doing crimes, many with illegal weapons and some with legal weapons. Many facing mental health challenges, and many part of the ills that society has not dealt with yet. We recently had a senseless shooting of a police officer in the city of Springfield, Nestor Santos. This legislation strikes a balance between protecting the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens and implementing common sense measures to prevent the illegal use of firearms and potentially save lives. Today, we provide our law enforcement partners with some tools to track and trace firearms. Who could be against that? A 20-year-old just shot our former president. And within an hour, they traced that weapon to who was the legal user of that weapon, and that helped in the investigation. Why shouldn't we track and trace every single weapon involved in every crime in Massachusetts? In Springfield, 80%, 85% of the weapons have serial numbers that are confiscated during crimes. Why don't we know where that weapon came from? And some are going to tell me it comes from North Carolina or South Carolina or somewhere else. So be it. Let us know. And if it's at a gun show or a gun shop and the gun is sold illegally, we need to hold them accountable. We also have to hold accountable those on the streets doing crime with illegal weapons. Absolutely. Absolutely. In the communities that are mostly impacted, in the Black and Latino community, you got 100% of those members of those communities supporting locking up illegal elements of doing crime illegally. This is not about creating new barriers. It's about strengthening our existing framework to better protect our communities. And you heard from my distinguished colleague from Sutton, which I have the utmost respect for, who may not support the bill, but acknowledge that there are some good parts of this bill. And I ask all of you to look at the good parts of the bill. including mandatory sentencing guidelines for possession of selling, using, or making an illegal weapon. Raise your hand if you're not for that. For too long, we have all been to many funerals, many tears, and because we're going to infringe on a few people's rights, while many children and those facing mental health are suffering because of gun violence. And I have every single letter, close to 400, that was sent to me that this bill, when first presented, was going to remove guns from legal gun users. I challenge every single one of you in this building that not one weapon will be removed from a legal, authorized gun user. That I don't want to register a gun. You will hear the nuance. I want to be with 30 rounds into an automatic weapon because the Second Amendment right says I can. But you won't hear the argument that we're going to take your gun away because it's not in this bill. I went to the gun shop. I met with all of them. They thought I wasn't going to go. Of course I went. And I shot with them at a range. And in that gun shop, part of the responsibility as part of their policy to give anybody the right to purchase a weapon includes live fire rounds, training and shooting a weapon. And I said, that's what the bill says. So you support that? And they said, absolutely we do. I said, so will you come and voice your support just for that part of the bill? But they say no. And that's where we're locked up in this country. You know what's right, but you won't do it because somebody told you a long time ago or recently that to take away any rights of a gun owner is unconstitutional. But this bill, and to the credit to the gentleman from Stoneham, in my opinion, his tenacity in not only knowing the subject matter, but knowing the Constitution, this may get challenged, but they won't win. And to all my conferencees, I thank all of them because we had honest conversation. But the ultimate responsibility that we were given, and I think that each and every take responsibility for doing something about it. So thank you, Madam Speaker. and thank the leadership, my colleague, and from Stoneham, and all of you that are gonna pay. Just like I asked the gun shop, you know it's right. You know it's right. Remember the kids, rich or poor, supermarkets, schools, streets, that have for illegal use of weapons. Illegal use of weapons is why this bill was put together. Thank you.
Speaker, and through you to the members. I too want to express my gratitude, my thanks to the Speaker of the House for his leadership on this, and all of the members of the House who are taking up this extremely important issue. And I want to really thank the gentleman from the Chairman of Lives. And I want to thank him for just a few minutes ago for giving an outstanding outline of the process that was fair, a process that was open, and an outstanding explanation of what is in the bill. And I want to thank also the gentleman from Springfield who just spoke for putting a tremendous amount of work and sifting through all of the many gun bills that got filed this year, and then being an important voice and putting, quite frankly, a human touch on the problem that we face and the problem that this bill solves. I thank you, Mr. Chairman, from Springfield as well. This House has a history of making Massachusetts one of the safest states in the nation, and we should all be proud of that. In the year 2000, after the federal assault weapons ban expired, this House, this legislature, and then the Republican governor at the time, Governor Cellucci, signed into law a statewide assault weapons ban. Then in 2014, under the direction of the previous speaker, who I thank as well for his work on this, we undertook a comprehensive look and a comprehensive revision of the gun licensing laws at that time and made the Commonwealth safer. As new issues and new technologies came up, this House took the lead in responding to them. We banned bump stocks after the horrendous shooting in Las Vegas. We initiated extreme risk protection orders when that became apparent that it was something we needed to do. And then in 2022, very quickly after what I will call the misguided Bruin decision from the Supreme Court of the United States, we acted very quickly to put our very important licensing system into compliance with the Supreme Court decision. And then realizing that we needed to do a complete overhaul of our firearm laws in response to changes in technology and in changes in the Supreme Court decisions, this body, under the direction of the able gentleman from Stoneham, undertook a significant study and has produced today a superb piece of legislation that deserves all of our support. With this piece of legislation, we modernize, we clarify, we simplify all of our firearm laws, and we will be a better and a safer Commonwealth as a result of it. We essentially have three challenges here. First, we have to comply with the Supreme Court decisions. Secondly, we have to keep our firearm laws up to date with ever-changing technology. And third, we had the challenge of having to simplify the laws so that the public can easily understand what the laws are. And all of this with the overriding goal of keeping Massachusetts citizens safe. We should be very proud of the work that this body and what the Commonwealth has done in the past, but our work is never done. And I suggest to you that with the passage of this bill and the governor's signature in a few days on this bill, we will have accomplished that goal. In 2022, after the Bruin case was decided, and then just a few weeks ago, after the Rahimi case was decided, it is a complete challenge for a state legislature to basically thread the needle according to what the Supreme Court will allow us to do. This legislation successfully threads the needle and will withstand any constitutional challenge. We should be proud of that. In looking at this legislation and meeting those goals that I just set out, the licensing process that is in here will be simpler, it will be transparent, it will be clear, and it fully complies with what the Supreme Court has mandated in the Bruin decision. Secondly, this legislation allows us to first keep up with changes in technology and anticipates that technology will continue to change. In 2014, the last time we did a complete overhaul, we did not know what ghost guns were. We did not know what bump stocks were. We did not know what Glock switches were. And we did not know what a 3D printer was, nor did we know that a 3D printer could produce a gun. The technology will continue to change. And that is why there are two aspects in this bill that are very important. Number one, a commission to study the ever-changing technology. And then secondly, the way that the law is written in this bill, it will continue to keep us safe from changes in technology that will be developed. I assure you, they will be continued to be developed because they have been, that can turn a semi-automatic weapon easily into an automatic weapon. That's what a bump stock does. That is what a Glock switch does. And there'll be something else. And this legislation anticipates that. And then thirdly, we heard a lot of complaints, legitimate complaints from gun owners, sportsmen, advocates through the years, that the Massachusetts laws were too confusing. They were sometimes conflicting. They were hard to understand. So this legislation makes it easier, makes it clearer, and satisfies those concerns. And we should be proud of that. I thank the gentleman, not from Sutton, but from Webster, for his work there, as well as many other advocates. And I want to thank all of the advocates on all sides of this issue who have come to this courthouse, who have lobbied us, who have called us, who have emailed us, and who all have the same goal of trying to make this Commonwealth a safer place. I want to just highlight a couple of areas that haven't necessarily received a lot of notice, but are important aspects here. First, as the chairman said, the live fire training. It has always boggled my mind, quite simply, that as part of driver training that we've all gone through when we were 16 years old or something, there were two parts of driver training. There was the classroom part, and then there was the actual driving a car. That makes sense. You wouldn't want to give somebody a driver's license without having them know how to drive a car. Yet in Massachusetts, unlike in many other states, we just required the in-class portion before you got a firearms license. This takes the important step of actually requiring that somebody who gets a firearm license actually knows how to safely load and fire a firearm before they get the license. That's just common sense. Secondly, we're expanding the people who can apply for an extreme risk protection order, a very important tool. We're expanding it to police officers. We're expanding it to school administrators. We're expanding it to healthcare providers who've actually treated the person. That just makes sense because these are the people outside of the family who would be in a position to know, whether or not one is necessary and would know the person best. This, one other aspect that is important here relates to a change in the harassment order statute. Let me try to explain that. There are two types of orders in Massachusetts that a district court or probate court can get. One is a so-called Chapter 209A restraining order. That only applies to someone who's been in a domestic relationship or a long-time dating relationship, and it's a very important tool. As part of a 209A restraining order, the person who is the subject of that order would have to surrender any firearms that he or she has. It's an important safety tool because one of the most dangerous parts or most dangerous times in a domestic violence victim's life is that time immediately after the order is issued, when the emotions are running the highest. And so it's important to get firearms out of the situation. There was a loophole in Massachusetts law related to the so-called harassment orders. Harassment orders are the orders that a district court or a probate court judge can order when there's not that close relationship that qualifies as a domestic relationship. But they're important too. Again, but under the old statute, the harassment order statute, there was no provision for removing the firearms. This closes that loophole, and that closing of the loophole will save lives. This bill is a major advancement, and we should all be proud. Our work is never done. Technology ever changes. That we set out as a body. Our most important job as a state legislator is to protect public safety. Need to do above all else. At the beginning, I laid out the names of 14 people that have been killed by firearm just in the past few weeks. That's obviously 14 too many. Let's continue, if not the safest state in the nation. This bill is an important step towards doing it. It is an important step towards meeting our most important goal, which is to protect the public safety. The other 49 states in the United States of America, and I hope with all of my heart that the other 49 states, and maybe someday even the Congress of the United States, will again look to Massachusetts and follow our lead. I want to thank each and every one of you. I want to thank the Speaker and Chairman Day and Chairman Gonzalez. We should be very, very proud. Let's enact this bill. Thank you very much.
Roll call having been ordered, court officers will summon the members and inform them that a roll call is in progress.
And this is roll call number 135. 135.
Have all members voted who wish to do so? Time for voting is expired. The clerk will display the tally.
123 to 33.
In this matter, 123 in the affirmative, 33 in the negative. The report is accepted. House will be in a brief recess. The chair is delighted to take this opportunity to wish Representative Schmidt a very happy birthday. Mr. Jones of North Reading moves that the House stand in recess subject to the call of the chair. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The House stands in recess subject to the call of the chair. House will be in order. The following bill being rightly and truly prepared comes before the House for final enactment. House 4885, enact modernizing firearm laws. Question comes on passing the bill to be enacted. The chair recognizes Mr. Mom of Lowell.
I rise today in support of House 488. Contain many important changes to our gun law, but one aspect is personal for me. 10 years ago, as a freshman representative, I filed an act prohibiting houses. Since my first term, I have continued to advocate for this important legislation. As I near the end of my 5th term, I can reflect and say many things have improved around us. Unfortunately, however, shooting at the dwelling house remain as much of a problem as ever. When this bill was first introduced, there had been a series of shootings into houses in the city of Lowell. Our district attorney, Miriam Ryan, police officer, made it clear to me that they needed new legislation to make this incident easier to prosecute. While other laws can and are currently used to prosecute this incident, nothing currently on the books is as exact fit, which make the work of prosecutor more difficult. Without properly defining this crime, it is difficult to secure a conviction or have punishment fit the crime if there is. We must give our law enforcement professionals every tool possible to keep our families safe and do their job effectively. This bill before us today specifies this crime and punishment. As I have advocated for this legislation these past 5 terms, I have continued to hear from families who have been impacted by this incident. It is heartbreaking to hear the story of how they have been traumatized. In place where they should feel safest, the acts of violence, which are often random, have long-term impact. My continued advocacy on this legislation is much about family as it is for supporting our law enforcement professional. As a father of 4 incredible children, I have worried about what may happen if gunfire would strike my home. I am proud that the chamber appear to be in a position to finally advance this important legislation. I'm grateful to Speaker Mariano, Chairman Mickwit, Chairman Days, and so many others for finally making this moment a reality. Lawlessness, random act of violence must never be allowed or become normalized. In the 21st century in America, there's no reason for this to be happening. We're all human. We all deserve to be safe, especially in our home. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for allowing me to speak on this important legislation.
Question comes on passing the bill to be enacted. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The bill is passed to be enacted. At the request of Mr. Cusack of Braintree, will the members, guests, and employees please rise for a moment of silent tribute in respect to the memory of Paul Dan Clifford, a lifelong resident of Braintree, passed away peacefully at his home July 10th, 2024. His commitment to service was exemplified by his proud service in the United States Army during the Vietnam War. His dedication to public service was unwavering, as he spent 20 years serving as the town of Braintree, various capacities, serving on the town council, board of assessors, the Fair Housing Committee, and as a town meeting member. Dan is survived by his beloved wife Colette and his loving children Karen, her husband John, Marcy, her husband Tom, Sean and his wife Katie, Colleen and her husband Chris, as well as Ryan. He was the cherished Papa, Cliffy or Pup, to his 13 grandchildren and great Papa to his 2 great-grandchildren. Dan was a dedicated patriot who loved God, his family, hometown, and country. He will be missed by all who knew him. Notification of members, she has not entered any further roll calls. This